Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 16th year of Chungi and the 7th month. And what are we now, the 20th day? I'm thinking we're the 20th day, right? Of the 7th month, or we're still quite short of that. Maybe this is the 19th day. Oh, yeah, 20th day is right. 20th day. By the heavenly calendar. Boy, we're getting close to the next year. 2 weeks from the next holy day. Okay, got to start preparing. Timel is sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk Gyeongjin-mun. Let's go and take our tour around the kingdom right now. In Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 57 degrees and mostly cloudy. 79 for a high today. Areas of fog this morning, otherwise partly sunny, and then 51 for a low tonight. Clear skies, and then father's hometown, Cheongju in North Pyongan province. Currently 78 degrees. That's North Pyongan province and Korea, North Korea today. 78 degrees, mostly clear right now, getting down to 63 tonight, partly cloudy and humid. Tomorrow, 84 for high, humid with increasing cloudiness. And then at the Cheonryung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently mostly sunny and 49, and a high of 78 today, areas of morning fog, otherwise mostly cloudy. I'm sorry, mostly sunny. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low of 51. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, it is currently 63 and clear. Today, plenty of sun, high of 94. And tonight, clear and low of 69. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently mostly clear and 80. Rather cloudy and humid, low of 71. Tomorrow, cloudy and humid, a couple of afternoon showers, high of 84. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 77 and cloudy, humid, and with occasional rain and drizzle tonight, going down to 70 degrees. And tomorrow, high of 74, brief morning shower or two, otherwise cloudy and humid. And at Ilan, Taiwan, currently 84 and clear, low of 76 tonight. Tomorrow, a high of 94, partly sunny and hot, thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon. All right, yeah, 94. Yeah, when is it going to cool down here? Okay. All right, let's go to Father's Word. And let's see what we have here today. And I'm in the World Scripture 2. And I'm in chapter 22, which is on peace. Ah, that's a nice topic right now. And chapter 22 on peace. And this is a quotation from Tukir, which English translation is the way of the will. When you become indebted, then you start to act like a slave for that person. In other words, the person who has lent you the money, I guess, for the creditor. And if you don't do that, then you will be destroyed. And even 반대할 수 없는 자리까지 나가야 그때에 비로소 자리를 잡을 수 있다. So you can only establish yourself when you go to the position where people will not be able to oppose you even if they try. Right. And I've talked, I think, about the influence of money in our life, and society sort of expects of us to have a mortgage, especially in America, probably in Europe as well. Especially, well, expects us to have a mortgage, and if we don't have a house with a mortgage, then somehow, we're not on the path to success. Oh, you're successful. You have a $500,000 mortgage. You have a $600,000 mortgage. You're paying. Back when we had a mortgage, we started out paying, I think, something like $1,900 a month or $2,000 a month, and this was 25 years ago or 24 years ago that we first bought a house. We held a house for 10 years, and then actually it was during the sort of the housing bubble or just after the housing bubble when things were coming down that we were able to sell the house for a fairly nice profit. But by that time, because we were spending so much money on the house, both in terms of interest, in terms of fixing things up, in terms of taxes and insurance and this, that, and the other thing. Plus, we had kids in college and everything like that. So we were actually up to here in credit card debt. So we had to use the proceeds from the house sale to clear out our credit cards, and um, that was very fortunate for my wife and I, because then we were able to sort of well, we were able to get our credit cards down to a much more manageable situation, and we've been essentially debt free. I say essentially debt free because, you know, we do take on a little bit of debt, but we take on only as much debt as we can pay off in, let's say, 4 to 6 months. You know, that's the amount of that's the sort of our upper limit of debt that we take on now. So, you know, we live in a society where uh, debt actually is money, credit is money, and so there is to be able to function effectively in society, it's often necessary to have a little bit. But you know, like these days, what my bank keeps telling me, oh, this month your FICO score went up, your FICO score went up, or it went down, and I don't care. I do not care about FICO score anymore. And if you don't know what FICO score is, you are blessed. You are blessed. You don't need to know. Don't even look it up. You don't need to know. Okay. You don't need to know. Basically, it's credit score. All right. But yes, uh, that that is a very fearful thing. You're really playing with fire when you go into debt. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see what is going on. And yeah, of course, Charlie Kirk. This was quite a shock. It happened during the night here, and we learned about it just as we were waking up to and preparing for Hundoke. And I guess it was just a few minutes before Hundoke began that President Trump published his uh, post on Truth Social that the death was confirmed. And that was quite a shock to all of us here, especially the king, and because he is truly one of the good guys. And uh, it's a terrible thing that happened. There's been a bit of a confusion, which you know often happens. They caught one guy, then released him. So I guess he's not the guy. Then they caught a second guy, and even Cash Patel went on X, I guess, and said, "Okay, yeah, this is the guy. We really got the guy this time." But then a few hours later, they said, "Oh no, I guess he's not the guy after all." They released him. So now, what we have right now is that this was a this appears to have been a professional hit. And let's see, I have something here about that. This is on what? This is in Newsweek. The shooting of Charlie Kirk in Utah had the hallmarks of a professional assassination, according to several security experts. A prominent conservative activist who was 31 was struck in the neck by a single gunshot as he delivered a speech to a large crowd on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem on Wednesday. He collapsed and was rushed to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. Analysts point to the firing of a single shot and a pre established escape route as evidence that the shooting had been carefully planned. Kirk was the founder of the right leaning youth organization, Turning Point USA, and a longtime ally of President Donald Trump. Trump released a video message later on Wednesday saying he was filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination, calling it a dark moment for America. The murder comes against the backdrop of bitter political divisions within American society, with Alex Goldenberg, a senior advisor to the Anti Extremism Network Contagion Research Institute, telling Newsweek the U.S. has an emerging assassination culture. Kirk was shot as he was addressing the crowd from an open tent on a stage in Orem at about 12:20 p.m. And this was in Mountain Time, so 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan said the shooter likely put a lot of preparation into the attack, telling Fox News' Jesse Waters, the assassination, different to the attack on Trump back in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a very well planned, very well orchestrated plot that was put in motion days before. This individual had a plan of escape to elude detection, of being out on a rooftop and also being able to evade and elude law enforcement, added Kaplan. This assassination of Charlie Kirk to me is indicative of a professional hit, and I'm not so sure we are quickly going to be able to apprehend this individual without some luck. Kaplan pointed to the shooter's use of only one shot and immediate disappearance as a sign of careful preparation ahead of the attack. The shot was taken to immediately incapacitate Charlie Kirk, and so this was not some amateur who just got up on the roof, said Kaplan. This seems the earmark of a professional that got up onto this rooftop well in advance. He was clearly undetected, and there was no indication that anyone saw him after that one single shot was taken. This is someone who had some experts, who had some experience, some level of sophistication to have mapped out exactly how this was going to happen. Former Republican New York State Senator and Homeland Security Advisor Michael Balboni made a similar point, telling Fox News it's an incredibly chaotic scene on a college campus, hundreds and hundreds of people there right immediately afterward. He added that a rifle sound was heard, and yet nobody was able to identify an individual, which most likely means that an individual was shooting from concealment and maybe had some way to suppress or to hide the flash of the gun, and again indicating that this is a sophisticated individual. One shot hitting the target from 200 meters away and then escaping without anybody seeing them, those are the hallmarks of a professional. Okay, and let's just look at this on Trump Truth Social. The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially by me. And now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you. So a search is ongoing right now. And Kash Patel, the FBI director, said on X that a person arrested after the shooting, initially thought to be the individual responsible, was subsequently released after questioning. Another person arrested in the aftermath has also been released. So two people, just to make clear, two people were apprehended and then questioned and then released. And so the actual shooter is still out there. And that's it, okay. But people, well, this is a big shock to all of us. And I think not only conservatives, but it should also be a big shock to all Americans and actually all sort of righteous people around the world. But of course, that's not necessarily the truth. Not necessarily everyone is sad about this or shocked by this. Some people on the left are celebrating this, and shame on them. But I am, and I think some of you are also old enough to remember the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. That happened when I was in high school, and while I was in Japan in an international school at that time, living in a dormitory, and there were some people who were celebrating that, and those were quite frankly stupid people. I will not call them evil, but they were certainly stupid people. They were racist and very stupid people, because this kind of thing does not help anybody. Political violence, of course, has a long history. At least goes back to Julius Caesar in Rome. Of course, Shakespeare wrote a whole play about his assassination. But because power is the way that power works is that when someone has power, and Charlie Kirk we would not call him powerful, but he was an influencer. And influence is a type of power. So when someone has power, then there are always people who want to take that power away. And in the case of Charlie Kirk, he was an excellent debater. And the left became very, very frustrated that they couldn't defeat him in debate. And so someone apparently took him out. In other words, killed him. And the person who actually pulled the trigger may not have had any kind of ideological uh, beef against Charlie Kirk. He was a professional, and a professional will often do something like this for money. And many times a professional will not care who they kill, as long as they are told, okay, uh, here's some money, and here's the guy, and we want you to kill him. And the professional will say, okay, I'll do it. And he just does it. He doesn't care who's on the other end of the bullet. So that may be the case here. So I'm not sure that the person who actually pulled the trigger was a leftist, but could have been completely amoral. In other words, no morals one way or the other. But the people behind him, at least, certainly were leftists or people who wanted to, I would have to say, their motivation had to be to incite some sort of a civil conflict and increase the social disruption in the United States. And in the past, many times assassinations are done by amateurs. The Butler, attempt. Um, I'm not sure that the guy who was arrested for this was the actual assassin, but even if he wasn't, then whoever it was also missed, right? So obviously, not a very good, not very professional. In the case of Martin Luther King, his guy was an amateur. Case of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. which was also, um, and I'm saying not Robert F. Kennedy, not Jr., but RFK, RFK Jr.'s father. His assassination was also, but by Sirhan, we are told, also by an amateur. Uh, President Kennedy's assassination, apparently someone who had training, but again, Oswald, who knows what actually happened with that as well. Um, but this one was a clear case of a professional doing the job. And I guess the people who are behind these things uh, messed up in Butler, and they said, well, this time let's get a guy who's actually going to do the job and not miss, because we don't want another repeat of Butler where the guy turns his head at the last minute and we miss. Uh, we want to make sure that this guy's dead. So somebody I think is behind these things that are going on. And President Trump has said that he's going to get to the bottom of this. He's going to find out who did it, and he also said that he's going to find out and prosecute whoever may be behind this situation with Charlie Kirk. Certainly wish him well, wish him all power in doing that. The One of the people that was quoted in this article just now said that there's an emerging assassination culture in America, and there was in the 60s, 70s, 80s as well. Remember, basically, it kind of ended with the assassination attempt on President Reagan. President Reagan survived that attack. He was in the hospital, and it was just a week or so, wasn't it? Or a couple of weeks after he was inaugurated. He was coming out of a building, and some knucklehead uh, tried to assassinate him, tried to shoot him, and wound up missing. And President Reagan was in the hospital, but he survived. And his press secretary was wounded and became an invalid for the rest of his life. Um, so I think that President Reagan's assassination attempt kind of well, then no, there was Ford as well, wasn't there? There was what was her name? Kiki something or other, some crazy girl, really crazy girl. So these things happen in America, and they've been happening. And of course, going back to President Lincoln, 1860, what was it, 1864. unfortunately, it has been a part of America for a long time. So I don't know that this is America is any worse than it has been through its history uh, as a result of this. It's a terrible thing that happened to Charlie Kirk. It's a terrible thing that happened to America, but America has survived before, and I hope that we can survive this as well. Okay. So we certainly pray for Charlie Kirk and his transition to the spirit world, and we also pray for his family that they can find God's comforting grace in this very difficult time. Yeah. All right. Also, Poland. Um, Interestingly, of course, Poland shot down, I guess, 14 drones, Russian drones that came into their territory. Al Jazeera is saying that these were drones that were returning to Russia after attacking Ukraine. And I haven't seen this elsewhere, that information. Poland has intercepted Russian drones that were flying over its airspace after completing a mission in Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine. All right, so that's on the other side of Ukraine. It's the first time a NATO member nation has fired shots in Russia's war on Ukraine. Okay, okay, and that's, I guess, one of them. So now Ukraine has, Ukraine or Poland, I'm sorry, Poland has invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty. And this is different from Article 5. Article 5 says that an attack on one is an attack on all. Article 4 is a little bit different. It's actually quite different. It says that, well, if we get attacked, then we'll sit around and talk about it for a while, is basically what it says. Let me just take a look at this article here. Poland invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty after a number of drones were shot down over its territory during an overnight Russian attack on Western Ukraine, which NATO officials said was the first time the alliance has responded to an incursion into its airspace. So at least this was not an attack on Poland per se. And Russia, of course, may have intentionally routed the uh, drones back over Poland to see what would happen, to see if this was something that they could do, if they could push the envelope this far. Prime Minister Donald Tusk told the Polish parliament Wednesday that the country's military had recorded about 19 drone incursions overnight. He added that 3 or 4 were shot down and that a significant number had flown into Polish airspace from Belarus. This is not a war only for Ukrainians. This is a war. This is a confrontation that Russia has declared against the entire free world, and this must finally reach everyone without exception, Mr. Tusk said. Article 4 of the NATO treaty calls for member states to consult, right? That's the important word there. Whenever the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of a member is threatened, it has been invoked only 7 previous times in the 76 years of the alliance, most recently in 2022, when Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia called for consultations after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. US President Donald Trump reacted cryptically on Wednesday morning. What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go, he wrote on Truth Social. So this is so here's Western Ukraine, right? Oh, where's my cursor? Here it is. Here's Western Ukraine, and here's Poland. All of this is Poland. And you got Belarus here, and Kaliningrad is Russian, and then you have Lithuania, which is also a NATO member. So Poland, NATO member, Lithuania, NATO member, Belarus, a Russian ally, Kaliningrad, Russian territory, and then Ukraine down here. And so what are the brown areas are areas where Polish citizens were told to stay home. Okay. The light brown areas are NATO members, and the airports temporarily closed. And then the red map dots are where the drones were found. And apparently they say the drones, at least some drones came in from Belarus. So that would seem to be kind of a roundabout way, right? Or I guess they could have come like that, but there's no reason unless they're trying to make their way to Kaliningrad, because Russia's way over to the east over here. Okay. Mr. Trump last month trumpeted progress on his efforts to end Russia's war on Ukraine, meeting with Russian President Putin in Alaska and Ukrainian President Zelensky and a troop of European leaders at the White House. But despite Mr. Trump backing down on his demand that Mr. Putin agree to a ceasefire and conceding to Russian demands that Ukraine not be allowed to join NATO and also give up territory to Russia, Mr. Putin has continued his attack on Ukraine. A meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, which Mr. Trump was pushing last month, has yet to happen. Earlier Wednesday, the military said about a dozen drones had entered the country's airspace. The Dutch Defense Ministry confirmed that its F-35 fighter jets based in Poland had helped ensure safety in Polish skies tonight. A NATO spokesman called the alliance's response the first time NATO planes have engaged potential threats in Allied airspace. Prime Minister Mark Carney called Russia's incursion reckless and escalatory in a post on X. Carney, of course, I guess is this a Canadian? Of course. This is a Canadian publication. All right, so that's why they're not telling us who Carney is. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. So, so Prime Minister Mark Carney called Russia's incursion reckless and escalatory in a post on X, adding that Canada stands with Poland and NATO allies. We are closely coordinating with them, and we will remain vigilant against Russia's attempts to widen and prolong conflict with Ukraine. So the situation in Ukraine is becoming quite. Well, I wasn't sharing this with you, was I? Okay. It's becoming quite untenable, isn't it? Um, quite a mess. Quite a mess that I wasn't showing that map. Okay. It's becoming quite a mess, and Putin just refuses to act in favor of peace. And Trump's reaction may be an indication that he's moving toward what I have been saying, that at some point he's just going to have to say, Ukraine, listen, um, we feel for you, but we've got bigger problems over in Asia. And just let the Europeans or have the Europeans take uh, full responsibility for Ukraine and let the war drag on for a while. And that may be where President Trump is going. You can sense that he's kind of distancing himself from this situation right now. And I think that maybe that trend is going to continue. I think President Trump's reaction is very telling. The Europeans, of course, are going to be upset because they say, well, America is always supposed to uh, be the world's policeman, and what are you doing? And this is a BBC live updates. Western allies rally around Poland as they condemn Russia. Moscow said it is ready to discuss the incident with Poland. Right. And here, BBC's a reporter at the White House says Trump's frustration with Putin is evident. Well, you can call it frustration, I suppose. Russian drone crashes into a man's house as he watched news about Russian drones. Here's one of the Russian drones that was found, built from a plywood frame and foam materials. That makes it much more difficult to detect in a radar. And weapons optional small explosive payload. Low cost means that it's mostly used as a decoy in swarm attacks alongside more expensive drones, apparently. And Zelensky calls for fewer statements and more action. You can understand that Zelensky, as the president of Ukraine, is going to be angry on this, but um, not sure what, unless the United States sort of actually escalates all the way and opens up a war with Russia, short of that, I don't know what can be done, unfortunately. Mm. All right, let's go to Nepal. And in Nepal, I think we reported on this briefly before. And of course, this is a situation where uh, young kids uh, became angry because their access to Facebook and WhatsApp and X and other 26 actually in all uh, internet platforms was cut off all of a sudden. And so they started demonstrating, but it's not just about that, but also about what they call Nepo babies, children of powerful people who like to show off their wealth online. So there's been a lot of anger about that. And a lot of, or significant number of young people were relying on X and Facebook and other places for their livelihood. And all of a sudden their livelihood was cut off. Of course, the government did this because because the platforms refused to submit to government censorship. And so then they started rioting, and the government said, "Okay, okay, okay, settle down. We'll put all the platforms back online." And I think right now they're back online. But the Gen Zers, once their riots started having momentum, they weren't satisfied, and so then they continued to attack, and even the government declared uh, um, curfew and sent out the military, but still, even the military was not able to get things under control. And now what we see is that members of the government are escaping by helicopter. Um, One wife of a former prime minister was killed by fire. She burned to death because she was in her house, and the protesters set fire to the house. Now there's a video going around, and you may have seen it. It was sent to me, and I know it was sent to other sanctuary leaders, alleging that this is the Family Federation president of Nepal being stripped and attacked by rioters. And I'm telling people that I'm highly, highly, highly skeptical of this video. You may have seen it. If you don't worry about it. But we don't know where the video was taken. Was it taken in Nepal? Was it taken someplace else? Was it taken within the last few days, or was it taken 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And who's the person in the video? We we can see that he's been stripped down to his underpants, and all he's wearing is his underpants, but then we cannot see his face. So we don't know that this is the Family Federation president. Now, I understand uh, I can understand how sanctuary people in Nepal would jump to the conclusion that this is who that is, because he has actually been making life very difficult for sanctuary people in Nepal. He's received money from Family Federation, and he uses that money to build up his political position in Nepal. And then, having established that position, he then turns around and does things to make life difficult for sanctuary people. And as he does that, he reports that to Family Federation, and then they say, "Oh yes, so that's very nice. You are a good person, and here's some more money." And then he uses that money, so it's a kind of an evil cycle that is going on. And so I'm sure that they would wish, you know, they shouldn't, but they wish that this were him. And if it were, I would not shed a tear. That is for sure. uh, I assume that he's not dead, that he's just, that they're just sort of stripping him and beating him and then turning him loose. I hope that's what happened to this person that's in the video. But I am highly, highly, highly skeptical that this is actually that person. Okay. All right. So just to put that on the record, and let's go into this video right now. You may know, I actually know the guy personally, or I used to know him, back in the day. I met him several times at various international conferences. So it's a sad fact that he has gone over to Hak Ja Han, and apparently all government people are trying to escape. Here's a video from Nepal uh, of people hanging on a rope or something from a helicopter and being whisked away. And this apparently is a genuine video. This is published by the Times of India. And Nepal is facing a severe political crisis as violent protests erupted in Kathmandu following a social media ban leading to Prime Minister Oli's resignation. Ministers and their families were evacuated by army helicopters amidst public anger, with videos showing dramatic escapes. So, I hope that our acquaintance, I can't quite call him friend, but our acquaintance is perhaps also one of those who is escaping. Dramatic scenes unfolded in Nepal as protesters did not spare corrupt ministers and their families who were evacuated via military helicopters rescue slings. Visuals of Nepalese hanging onto ropes and being rescued by choppers went viral on social media, with protesters looking on from the ground. And here this guy's saying the politicians have run away, they're all corrupt. And so now, I guess, apparently, there's this rapper, a Nepalese rapper, who may become the next prime minister. I don't know. The suspension of social media platforms triggered violent demonstrations in Kathmandu, resulting in the prime minister's resignation and departure from the country. The military has been deployed to maintain order, with soldiers patrolling the capital streets and implementing stay-at-home directives. The social media footage showed government officials and their relatives being airlifted to safety, and so forth and so on. We don't need to read that twice. On Tuesday, a massive demonstration, primarily comprising of student protesters, giving it the term Gen Z protest, resulted in widespread vandalism of government officials' residences and the parliament building. The protesters targeted and burned Communication Minister Gurung's house, attacked Deputy Prime Minister Bishnu Padal's residence, Nepal Reserve Bank Governor property, and former Home Minister Ramesh Lekhak dwelling. So you see, our acquaintance is not on that list. And so that adds to my skepticism of that video. Various recordings documented the finance minister being pursued and assaulted by protesters, while another showed crowds attacking Foreign Affairs Minister Arzu Rana Duba and her spouse, former Prime Minister Duba, at their Kathmandu residence. And he's not on that. He's not in that paragraph either, even though I think he is a former foreign minister. Military helicopters evacuated several ministers and their families during these incidents. Footage showed Duba bloodied and distressed in a field awaiting rescue. Prisoners initiated fires in cells and guard facilities, destroying the main entrance before escaping. Military personnel prevented the breakout, relocating inmates to alternative facilities. The unrest began following the government's restriction of social media platforms, citing non-compliance with the registration requirements. The demonstrations evolved to reflect broader societal frustrations, particularly amongst youth opposing perceived nepotism in political families. With youth unemployment at approximately 20% in the previous year, According to World Bank data, government estimates indicate over 2,000 young people daily depart Nepal seeking employment in Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian countries. Right? So I don't know where our acquaintance is, but he's not in this article, and I haven't seen him in any other article that I've read on this subject. So perhaps and actually he may be in Korea, because right now, just to sort of segue into an update here, the Family Federation has called for a 13-day special Cheongsong period, and the participants in this Cheongsong, which is being done in Chongpyeong, in Korea's Chongpyeong, Gapyeong, Chongpyeong, all leaders, all public officials in Family Federation in all countries around the world are supposed to come and participate in this 13-day Cheongsong period. I think I've already reported that she's been given an additional 3-day, or actually now 4-day period, I guess, because there's a weekend. So now, after not reporting on the 8th, not reporting on the 11th, and not report, and well, we'll have to see about the 15th. So this is our third chance, and we'll see what happens then. But in response to this, or kind of in or parallel to this, she has called for all sort of public officials, in other words, anybody receiving money from the Family Federation, I guess, uh, to all gather at Chongpyeong. Why? They say it's for Cheongsong. Perhaps. I think we will see what will happen with that. Anyway, it is going on from the 10th to the 23rd. And of course, these things can always be extended. So for right now, anyway, a 13-day period of Cheongsong. Why did she choose 13? That's Father's favorite number, but I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. Just because it's Father's favorite number is not going to influence her. All right. So anyway, that's the update on that. Okay, so today's the 11th. She should have uh, reported to the special counsel today, but she again said that, oh, I'm sick, and didn't report. And so the special counsel said, okay, we'll give you one more chance, 15th. And I'm just saying, it's a contrast. When Father was indicted, actually, authorities who indicted him were actually hoping that he would stay away. And I think it's generally assumed that the purpose of the indictment was to discourage Father from entering the United States ever again. But instead of doing that, of course, he got on the next plane, or anyway, he moved as quickly as he could to go to the United States and face the indictment as quickly as he could. So this is kind of a contrast to that, isn't it? They didn't have to call him 3 times. They did not have to call him 3 times. Whenever a government attacked Father, he did not run. He did not run. And he did not resist. Just like Jesus, right? Jesus. When the Romans came to arrest him in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter wanted to resist. He foolishly pulled out his sword and cut off the ear of one of the servants there, or somebody there, which Jesus quickly reattached so as to prevent the situation from escalating. But Jesus surrendered peacefully, and they didn't have to come after him 3 times. Right? They didn't have to do that. So I think Hak Ja Han is showing herself to be a coward, and showing that she doesn't really believe in her own uh, divine or alleged divine position. We read that place in Father's words where he said that when the UN forces were bombing the prison on October 1st, 1950, he said, "I knew I wouldn't die. I knew that heaven would protect me because, hey, I'm working to accomplish heaven's mission, and it would be a tremendous loss to heaven if I were to go to spirit world. So I knew that I would be protected." So he had that confidence. And when he was put in the Hongnan prison, he had that confidence although the average lifespan there was 6 months, he was not going to die. And when he was put in prison in Seoul at the Sodaemun prison in 1955, um, people went to visit him in prison. He says, "Hey, if you have time to visit me here, well, go back and study English." That's what he said. Go back and study English because you're going to need it in the future. He always had tremendous confidence in his divine mission, in his divine position before God. But apparently, Hak Ja Han doesn't have that. Doesn't have that. Right? And so she's as soon as the subpoena came, she first thing she did was run to the hospital, run to the hospital, which is what all the rich and powerful do in Korea, but that's because they're all cowards. Yeah, but at least someone who's supposed to be the only begotten daughter should be able to stand up and say, "Hey, you know what? No matter what they do to me, I'm going to be okay." And so go ahead. Let's do this. Let's do this. Yeah, but that's not her attitude at all, is it? And I just wonder what's going to happen on the 15th. Well, I guess we'll see. We'll see on Monday. We will see on Monday what will happen there. There are all sorts of possibilities right now, I think. All right, let's see. So that is that. And then let's go. Let's go to, of course, let's see here. Here's a story. And, the rhetoric is getting pretty heated on both sides here. And rhetoric is getting pretty heated. And that in itself can lead to escalation. But here, Putin's ally nuclear strike warning as U.S. threatens to collapse the Russian economy. So that's why I say, what are you going to do about Ukraine? If the United States could escalate, but that has its own risks and costs, and also um, have to ask ourselves whether this will bring China into the situation. Will China stand by and watch Russia be defeated? Already, the Chinese foreign minister told EU people, sort of in private, that China cannot afford for Russia to lose the war in the Ukraine. So what is this? So what's going to happen? U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent hinted this week that the U.S. and the European Union might partner to ramp up sanctions in an effort to collapse Russia's economy amidst its ongoing conflict with Ukraine. A harsh Russian invasion of Ukraine, which began in February 2022, has sparked a global condemnation as leaders perceive it unprovoked and unjustified. In response to these comments, Vladimir Solovyov, a presenter on Russian state television and close ally of Putin, issued a chilling nuclear threat this week, as reported by Julia Davis, a journalist who frequently translates and shares clips from Russian media. The news comes as experts warn of alarming signs of World War III, indicating that a Putin invasion of two NATO allies could be imminent. One would be Poland, I suppose. I don't know what the other one would be. Bessent says it's a question of what will collapse first, the Russian economy after all sanctions are imposed, or the Ukrainian army. For some reason, he thinks that if all possible sanctions are imposed against us, we will sit down at the negotiating table. We will just strike with our nuclear weapons, and that's it. He said we will carry out a strike, and that's it. So this is the Russian talking, right? He expressed his belief that Europe is getting ready for war against Russia and that Moscow should fight harshly and terribly. His threatening remarks emerge as tensions escalate in Eastern Europe following 19 Russian drones violating Polish airspace during a nighttime assault on Western Ukraine. Let's see, Poland officially triggered NATO's Article 4, we know that. The war has intensified concerns over nuclear weapon deployment, given Russia possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Russian media figures have repeatedly issued warnings about potential nuclear weapon usage throughout the ongoing conflict. Bessent discussed the prospect of implementing more severe sanctions against Russia during his NBC Newsweek press appearance this week. We are prepared to increase pressure on Russia, but we need our European allies to follow us, he said. Because if the US and EU do this together, we are in a race now between how long can the Ukrainian military hold up versus how long can Russian economy hold up. And if the US and the EU can come in, do more sanctions, secondary tariffs on the countries that buy Russian oil, that's China, right? So we're talking about China. The Russian economy will be in full collapse, and that will bring President Putin to the table. China and India, of course, but especially China, we're talking about. Energy chief demands European action. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright revealed to the Financial Times this week if the Europeans drew a line and said, we're not going to buy more Russian gas, we're not going to buy Russian oil, would that have a positive influence on the U.S. leaning in more aggressively on sanctions as well? Absolutely. And this is one of President Trump's complaints, right? That Europe keeps saying, "Oh, help us, help us, help us, help us, help Ukraine," but then they're also buying Russian oil. I mean, Europeans are oil and gas. And so President Trump, in a meeting with the German representative, was saying, "Listen, you're asking us to help you, but you're giving money to the person that we're supposed to help you against. So what's going on here?" I think President Trump is not just frustrated with Putin, he's frustrated with the Europeans as well. And of course, with Zelensky as well. And Lindsey Graham, oh boy, here we go, globalist here, called for new sanctions against Russia this week on X. "Mr. President, Congress is with you. We stand ready to pass legislation authorizing bone-crushing new sanctions and tariffs that can be deployed at your discretion." So I keep saying, let's do some sanctions on China. Do sanctions on China. Tell them, hey, you guys are helping Russia, so we're going to cut you out of the dollar system. Already, a lot of Chinese banks are under sanction, but they still use dollars, and we can stop that. And then, no matter what they say about all the internationalization of the yuan and BRICS currency and all this, that, and the other thing, but still, they need dollars, and they live and die by dollars. So we'll see what President Trump does about this. You can see a story about the pyramids. Hidden evidence of massive bedrock engineering at Giza Plateau. There seems to be more and more evidence that there were advanced civilizations on Earth prior to what we're aware of. And I just wonder. I think we don't know a whole lot about what happened between Adam and Noah. What we do know is that the Bible says 10 generations, 160 or 1600 years, but that's of course purely symbolic. So we don't know. It could be hundreds of thousands of years. And what we do know for sure is that by the time Noah came around, the world was just incredibly evil. And so God decided to destroy human beings and depopulate the world down to one lineage. But what was the actual content of that evil? That we don't know too much about. And there's some cryptic stuff in there about the sons of man having relations with women and stuff like that. And there's an assumption that the sons of man is an indication of angels, but uh, can angels have offspring with human women? I don't know. I don't think. I've always thought that that was not the case. Anyways, more and more archaeological evidence and other evidence coming forth, and I think that's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Yeah. Let's see here. CNN commentator Scott Jennings not sure if it's safe to be an outspoken conservative anymore. Well, I think things can be done safely. Um, Charlie Kirk was fond of doing outdoor events in open tents and almost daring someone uh, to take a shot at him. I think, and I think uh, conservatives can continue to speak out, but in safer situations. And because we're in a war, we do need to adapt. And so I think it is really great, fantastic that the Ride Around Freedom Festival this year is being moved indoors, where it'll be easier to control the situation, control the environment. And I think there's still discussion going on as to exactly how security will be handled during the Ride Around Freedom Festival. But I'm sure some very common sense and very practical decisions will be made to make sure that the people, all the speakers who attend the festival, will be able to speak freely without fear of being shot at. We're here. Yeah, it turns out that the UK's ambassador to the United States right now had some Epstein ties. Okay. Let's take a look at let's take a look at the where's the Newsmax? Take a look at Newsmax here. Just a couple of minutes that we have left. Trump White House address, Charlie Kirk, martyr for truth and freedom. Yes, absolutely true. Okay. All right. And Trump and Netanyahu clash and fiery call and Qatar strike as Israel struck Qatar. And Dr. Robert Malone says Kirk was future presidential material. He was 31 years old, so it would have been a few years before he could qualify to run for president. But yes, he was certainly that. Okay. And Ukraine war warns Russia sows U.S. discord among World War III threat. Something like this could serve to help to unite Americans more. I hope that that is the case. But there are stupid people, and some even evil people, who will celebrate this assassination. But let's um, relate to them with love. Mhm. Love can take all forms. All right. Thank you. Tomorrow is Friday, so I'll be here again tomorrow. And God bless Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.